A man waist-deep in freezing pond water, smearing river mud onto a dome of sticks while his dog stood guard on the snowy bank. The settlement called it madness before the first log was laid, but Daniel Reeves wasn't listening.
You've lost your mind, Reeves. Building a den for yourself like a cursed beaver?
They don't freeze. The beavers never freeze.
A madman building a den in the mud. Mark my words, he'll drown come spring.
Daniel pressed another thick gob of clay into the woven branches, ignoring the distant laughter. Snow began to fall, silent and certain, as he hauled a mud-laden branch onto his shoulder. His hands were cracked and bleeding, but his face held something the town couldn't name: certainty.
She wouldn't have frozen if I'd built this sooner.
By nightfall, the shell of a beaver lodge-shaped hut rose from the pond, its true secret hidden beneath the waterline. For 3 more bitter dawns, Daniel Reeves worked, while snow buried the ridge and the settlement laughed. He sank a hollow log into the underwater entrance, packing the seams until no draft could pass.
He's building a coffin for himself, I tell you. Trapper's gone as wild as his prey.
A hand unknown nailed a scrap of paper to a birch tree near his camp. The scrawl said it plain: Daniel's folly. A crude beaver laughed beside the words. Inside the lodge, he unrolled the leather journal his wife had kept during their last winter. Her final entry, in shaky script: "The stove can't keep up. I am so tired of being cold."
Not again. I'll build a shelter the cold cannot find, the way the beavers do.
When the moon rose, the lodge stood completed against the frozen sky, its muddy dome steaming faintly, a crooked silhouette that looked like nothing the valley had ever seen. The first hard freeze came without warning, the pond's surface thickening to gray iron overnight. Yet a narrow ribbon of open water still snaked away from the lodge. Daniel moved his last load inside with a calm the settlement mistook for surrender, the mud dome steaming against the frozen air. Inside, he lit a small fire on a stone hearth. The thick mud walls drank the heat and gave it back slowly.
It holds. The cold stays outside.
He tested the underwater entrance, plunging into the black water and surfacing in the cold air without a shiver.
The beavers taught me well.
By noon, the settlement's main water butt had frozen solid, a block of ice too thick to break.
It's a hard frost, nothing more. My stove will keep the whole house warm. Let the fool freeze in his mud hut.
A sled driver pounded past the store, shouting through the rising wind. The sky's black to the north. This winter will kill men in their beds. That night, as the gale shrieked across the valley, Daniel sat in the lodge's warm shell and listened, the sound of a storm that could not find him. For 3 days, the blizzard buried the valley, in drifts taller than a man. Inside, no draft stirred the fire. Daniel pressed the seams, solid as stone.
She would have been safe in here. The thought came unbidden, and with it a quiet ache.
In the settlement, Anthony's door had frozen shut, welded by a thumb of ice.
Curse this cold. A man can't even open his own door.
Every chimney in town was dead. Only the distant lodge breathed smoke. Daniel broke the skin of ice at the entrance and dove into the black water without hesitation. He surfaced with a fish in each hand, water streaming, while Rusty barked on the frozen crust.
The pond doesn't freeze deep. It gives water, fish, and a reason to endure.
By firelight, he gutted the fish, while in the settlement, families huddled in darkness and ate nothing. The blizzard did not ease. Day became a gray memory. Night became a howl. Daniel opened a naturalist's book to a woodcut of beavers, building, diving, sealing their lodge against the ice.
They build their door beneath the water, and winter never locks them out.
At the settlement's frozen creek, a gaunt woman chopped at the ice with a hatchet, tears freezing on her cheeks. Anthony's own table held only empty bowls and a single frozen fish, too hard to cut.
My stove's barely warm. The water barrel is solid. This cold, it's not normal.
His reflection in the ice bucket stared back, hollow, confused. His wife's voice came from the corner, thin and shaking.
Maybe the trapper wasn't crazy. Maybe he shut up. I won't hear it.
Beavers don't argue with the river. They just build what the land demands.
While the settlement whispered rumors of a secret spring, Daniel hauled a net of fish from the black water below the ice. The pond gave more than water. Silver fish wriggled against the mesh, and Rusty barked at the hole. Inside the warm shell, He threaded the fish on a line, hanging them above the fire, a store against worse days. At the frosted trading post, men argued. An old trapper wiped ice from his beard and spoke without looking up. Beavers got their ways. The old man muttered, "Their lodges never freeze shut, doors under the water."
Anthony scoffed, but his hand trembled on the counter. Underwater entrance? Trappers just lucky. What if the old man was right? Underwater entrance. Could it be? He shook the thought away, but it clung.
In the lodge, Daniel filled extra skins with water and stacked them near the hearth, as if he knew the world would knock soon.
They'll come. Pride lasts only until the fire dies.
Outside, the blizzard refused to break. Settlement chimneys stayed cold, and the snow fell on. In the settlement, a child's cough stopped in the night. By morning, a small mound of snow marked the place where they buried her. Anthony took an axe to the frozen cache where his supplies should have been. Solid ice, mocking his blows.
There's nothing left. We're buried alive in this cursed valley, and no one is coming to save us.
Inside the lodge, the fire crackled, but a distant cry cut through the howl. Rusty lifted his head and whined.
Not yet, boy. They have to choose to come themselves.
At Daniel's abandoned cabin, Anthony fell to his knees in the drift, the cold seeping through his coat, his pride finally cracking open. The blizzard screamed, but the lodge stood like a breathing animal, its entrance a dark promise against the white. Daniel looked at the water skins, the drying fish, the stacked wood, a storehouse meant for more than one.
Soon, pride won't keep them warm forever.
The storm howled on, and the settlement's hope dwindled to a single question. How long could a man survive on pride alone? Anthony pressed his hand to his wife's burning forehead. The denial he'd carried for weeks finally cracked.
Reeves was right. God forgive me. I've been wrong all along. We go to the madman's den. It's that or die.
The small procession shuffled onto the frozen pond, breath clouding, hope stretched thinner than the ice beneath them. The ice groaned. A sudden crack split the surface, and a man plunged into the black water before desperate hands hauled him back. They retreated, beaten. His wife's whisper came through the dark. "Try again, for the children." That evening, Daniel hung an oil lantern outside the lodge entrance, its flame a small, steady defiance against the storm. From the settlement's edge, they saw it, a tiny flame on the white waste. A child's hand rose pointing. He was waiting.
They'll come tomorrow. I'll have the fire hot and the fish ready.
Anthony stood at his icy window, the distant light reflected in his hollow eyes. Tomorrow he would not return empty-handed. At dawn, hollow figures crossed the ice, led by a woman who would not let her children die. Daniel pulled a frozen man through the entrance by the forearm, into the warm shell. He pressed a cup of water into an elderly woman's cracked hands, her sobs lost in the steam. A child tore into smoked fish, eyes shut in something closer to prayer than hunger. The refugees stared at the hanging fish and the impossible warmth, and the truth of the lodge broke over them.
The pond never freezes deep. The entrance stays open beneath the ice. The beavers showed me how.
On a distant ridge, Anthony watched the lodge glow and felt his pride crumble into the snow.
He copied the beavers, an underwater door, and I called him mad.
The lodge, once a joke, was now the only place the valley's cold had not conquered, and the man who built it simply stoked the fire and waited for the next knock. Word spread. More hollow faces appeared at the entrance, and the lodge hummed with voices, long unused. Daniel showed the men a woven fish trap, his hands patient as he explained the beaver's ancient trick.
Keep the entrance below the ice line, and the fish will come to you.
A freckled boy pulled his first fish through the hole, and the cramped dome erupted in thin, disbelieving laughter. From his frozen office, Anthony heard it, a sound he had not made in weeks. Laughter. His wife's voice was ice. "We're going to the lodge. The children will not die for your pride." She pulled the door shut. He sat among frozen ledgers and unpaid debts, the trappings of a trader who had bet against the wild and lost.
Everything is gone. The furs, the money, the respect. And the madman in the mud is the only one still standing.
He pounded the desk once, the sound swallowed by the blizzard outside. The lodge thrived, a cramped, steaming arc on the ice, while Anthony sat alone in the cold truth that pride had cost him everything. A week passed. The blizzard's howl softened, but the cold sank deeper, and Anthony's cabin grew darker. In the lodge, Daniel scratched words into a worn journal. First, watch the beaver. He taught anyone willing how to weave the trap, how to seal the mud, how to read the ice. In his dead cabin, Anthony stared at the scrap he had kept, a crude drawing of a beaver, the words Daniel's folly mocking him.
I called him a fool, but the joke is carved on my own bones.
He bundled his last prime beaver pelts, the currency he once prized above all else, and walked onto the cracking ice. At the tree line, the folly note still fluttered. He tore it down, the sound like a brittle confession.
Reeves, I have furs to trade. His voice cracked, thin as the ice beneath him.
Daniel emerged, water still dripping from his coat. Rusty growled once, then pressed against his master's leg. Teach me. I'll pay. Daniel looked at the pelts, then at the gaunt face of the loudest skeptic, and said nothing. Not yet. Daniel pushed the furs back with one mud-caked hand and gestured toward the dark entrance. For a breath, Anthony didn't move. Then he ducked inside, and firelight caught the wetness gathering in his eyes. Daniel handed him a cup of water, the same cup he'd offered to every other soul that winter.
I mocked you. A child died because I was too proud. His voice splintered into silence. I knew about the underwater entrance. Old trappers told me. I just didn't want to believe a man could be smarter than a beaver.
Now you know. That's enough. Daniel's voice was flat, but his eyes held no malice.
He knelt by the entrance tunnel and pressed his hand against the packed mud where water lapped just below the rim.
The entrance goes below the ice line. The pond insulates it. That's why it never freezes shut.
Anthony listened, the cup trembling in his grip, as the first lesson of humility settled into his bones. And in the cramped, steaming dome, the loudest skeptic became a student, and the madman's folly became the only school that mattered. The days that followed became a quiet ritual of mud and patience, Daniel showing, Anthony failing, then slowly succeeding. Daniel showed Anthony how to pack the clay so no draft could pass. His hands were patient, correcting, never mocking.
This is harder than trapping.
But a late winter storm rushed over the ridge, bringing a flash freeze that threatened to seal the entrance. Daniel and Anthony worked side by side, deepening the entrance channel so the colder water would not lock them out.
It's holding, Daniel. It's really holding.
He was up to his elbows in frigid muck, but the name, Daniel, came without thinking.
Good. Now we know it can take a flash freeze.
By dawn, the channel steamed. Deep water held its warmth, and the fish swirled safely below, untouched by the ice above. And the lodge, once called a folly, held them all. A huddled, breathing, stubborn thing that refused to freeze. When the ice finally broke, spring rushed in. The lodge steaming, fish drying on racks, bees droning in the thawed mud. Daniel's journal, a beaver's lesson, passed through calloused hands, its pages stained with water and fish oil. Anthony gathered the townsfolk near the pond. This time, he wasn't laughing.
I mocked him while his door never froze. I owe him my family's lives and an apology to all of you. I'll fund a new community lodge if you'll allow it. Name your terms. He turned to Daniel.
The land already gave us everything we need. Teach each other. That's payment enough.
He gestured toward the drying fish and the open channel. The settlement saw not a madman, but a teacher. A child tugged his sleeve. Will you show us how, Mr. Reeves? Daniel nodded, and a murmur of hope moved through the crowd like a shift in the wind. And so the lodge, that crooked dome of mud and sticks, became the heart of the valley, the first school of a winter that couldn't be forgotten. The man who built it simply picked up his tools and walked to the water's edge, a dog at his heels, and began teaching the next lesson. One morning, Daniel led Anthony up the creek to where a beaver dam pooled the water, smooth as glass.
They know how to hold water back. We just needed to learn.
A beaver surfaced and slammed its tail, a sound Anthony had heard 1,000 times, but now it resonated in his bones.
I've killed hundreds, he said. Never understood a single one.
My wife used to sketch them. She'd have liked this spring.
Anthony's hand tightened around the pelt at his belt. He looked at the dam, then at Daniel. They stood in the sun, listening to the trickle of water and the chatter of birds.
I've been hunting engineers and I never saw it.
Then, without a word, they walked back, the lesson complete, the silence easy. And in the pond, a beaver swam past the lodge, as if it had always known. Throughout the valley, families shaped low domes of branch and mud, each with an entrance below the waterline. That evening, Daniel closed his journal. The final line read, "When you live like the land lives for you." Rusty nudged a wriggling puppy, a gift from Anthony, and his tail wagged for the first time since the thaw. A child asked if he'd stay forever, and Daniel looked toward the steaming dome.
As long as the beavers do, I reckon.
The lodge, once a joke scrawled on bark, had become the heart of the valley. Fish dried on the racks. The pond never froze again. Every winter after, when the ice came, the people remembered. Daniel never sought fame. He mended his coat and taught whoever was willing. His name wasn't in newspapers, but it was carved into every mud lodge that stood against the cold, and the man who built it never asked for thanks. But the valley gave them anyway. Spring after spring, the lodge steamed beside the pond, fish drying and wildflowers crawling up its walls. The beavers still worked the dam upstream, and the pond never froze to its depth. In the trading post, under glass, hung the scrap that once mocked him, Daniel's folly. Below it, a newer hand had scratched. "He lived like a beaver, and we survived because of it." Anthony taught the children how to pack the mud, his hands no longer grasping for pelts but for understanding. Daniel fished with the new pup at his heel, Rusty dozing in the sun. Dotted along the valley, small domes rose from the marshlands, each a silent lesson in listening. The oldest teachers never asked for thanks either, but the valley remembered, and the lodge stood long enough that no one could recall its name had ever been a joke. It was simply the way things were done. The next winter came gentle, as if the valley had learned respect for the man who listened to beavers.
I still can't believe I called it a den in the mud.
You weren't wrong. It was a den in the mud, just a warmer one than any cabin I've known.
I've watched you, Daniel. You don't fight the cold. You let the water hold the warmth, just like the beavers.
The beavers don't teach, they just live. I paid attention.
The lodge, once a curiosity, had become the heart of the valley, a living proof that survival belonged to those who observed, not those who conquered. Children who had shivered through that first winter now brought their own families to the domes. They'd learned to build. They'd learned to build.
He never wanted credit, just to never freeze again. And he made sure we wouldn't either.
The deadliest winter had proved him right, and the proof lay not in the mud and sticks, but in every breath drawn inside them. Daniel never wrote a final chapter in his journal. The lodge itself was the last word. Years folded into decades, and the lodge never crumbled. Each spring, hands young and old packed fresh mud into the walls. The pond gave fish. The entrance held open, and the smoke rose through the vent like a slow heartbeat. Daniel's hair had turned the color of snow, but his hands still knew the feel of clay and the give of willow branches.
She would have liked the quiet of this place.
The settlement had become a village, and the village remembered. In the trading post, the framed scrap had yellowed, but the words beneath remained. "He lived like a beaver, and we survived because of it." What men once mocked had become the valley's deep-rooted habit, to watch the wild and learn, not to fight it. Daniel left no fortune, but he left a doorway beneath the ice that would never freeze shut. The deadliest winter had proved him right, but every winter after proved him wise. And in the quiet of the pond, the beavers went on building, as they always had, as they always had, as they always would. On a still autumn afternoon, two old men sat beside the lodge, their coats thin, their eyes deep with years.
I spent my first 40 winters fighting the cold. You spent yours watching beavers, and you won.
Not a contest, Anthony. Just listening.
A beaver slapped its tail, and they both turned. The sound no longer a startle, but a punctuation to the silence they'd earned. The lodge behind them steamed, a living monument to the lesson that saved them all. The wild already knew how to survive.
We'll be gone someday. But the pond won't freeze, and they'll keep building.
That's enough.
They watched the water until dusk seeped into the valley. No more words needed. The deadliest winter had passed, but its lesson had taken root. A mud dome, a hidden door, a man who lived like a beaver, and the valley, carved by ice and thaw, whispered his name back to anyone who paused long enough to listen. In time, even the name on the framed scrap faded, but the lodge stood, a shape that made sense only to the water and the mud. Strangers passing through would stop, puzzled, and ask why a man had built a beaver's den at the water's edge. A child who had never known a winter without it would simply shrug and say, "It's just the way we build." No plaque, no statue. Just the soft slap of a beaver's tail and the promise that the entrance would never freeze. The valley kept his lesson as a secret told by mud and water, not by men. On the trading post wall, the old scrap yellowed further, its charcoal beaver almost unrecognizable. But a newer hand had traced beneath it. He built what the beavers taught. No winter could take it. That was enough. That was always enough. And one spring evening, a child pointed at the dome and said, "Look, the beavers built a big one this year." The old trapper, sitting nearby, just smiled and nodded. The framed scrap on the trading post wall gathered dust, its charcoal beaver nearly invisible, but no one needed to read it anymore. The lodge itself remained, a lesson in mud and branch. Each winter, steam rose from the dark entrance, the only breath on a frozen pond. Each spring, the drying racks creaked with silver fish, and wildflowers crowded the base of the dome. A gray-muzzled beaver swam the pond each dawn, as if keeping watch over the strange, warm den. The man who built it was gone, but his rhythm lived on in every hand that packed fresh clay. The valley no longer fought winter. It built for it, the way the beavers always had. On the ridge where a skeptic once stood, a woman pointed to the steaming dome and began the story again. Not a legend of a hero, just a man who paid attention when the world was trying to teach him. And in the hush of evening, the lodge steamed, the beaver swam, and the pond gave back the sky.